My name is Jake, and I don't pick up hitchhikers anymore. That had happened 3 weeks ago on a deserted highway. It was past midnight, the road stretching endlessly before me. The only company I had was the occasional flickering streetlight and the low hum of my car's engine. That's when I saw her. She stood at the side of the road, her pale arm raised in a silent request for a ride. She was young, maybe in her early 20s, wearing a thin white dress that seemed out of place in the chilly night air. Something about her felt off, but I couldn't just leave her there. I slowed down, rolling the window down slightly. "Need a ride?" I called out. She nodded, her lips barely parting. "Thank you." Her voice was barely above a whisper. She slipped into the passenger seat, her movements slow and deliberate. I noticed her feet bare and dirty, like she had been walking for miles. "Where are you headed?" I asked, trying to shake off the unease creeping up my spine. "Just down the road," she murmured. We drove in silence. I stole glances at her from the corner of my eye. She was staring straight ahead, her hands folded neatly in her lap. Something about the way she sat, so stiff, so motionless, made my skin crawl. Then, after a few miles, she spoke. "You should slow down." I frowned. "I'm barely going over the limit." "You should slow down," she repeated, turning her head toward me. That's when I saw her eyes. They weren't human, hollow, dark voids where her pupils should have been. My breath caught in my throat as the temperature in the car dropped. My hands trembled on the wheel. I slammed the brakes. The car skidded to a stop on the empty road. My pulse hammered in my ears. I turned to look at her. She was gone. The seat was empty. The door was still locked. There was no sign that anyone had ever been there. Then I saw it in the rearview mirror, just outside my car. She stood in the middle of the road, staring at me. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. Then she lifted her arm again, pointing further, down the highway. My gaze followed her direction and my stomach dropped. Less than 100 feet ahead, the road was destroyed. A collapsed bridge loomed in the darkness, a sheer drop into nothingness. If I hadn't stopped, a gust of cold air swept through the car, and when I looked back, she was gone. I don't drive that road anymore, and I never pick up hitchhikers. My name is Ben, and I haven't listened to the radio since that night. I was driving cross-country, alone, on an empty highway. It was past midnight, and my eyelids were getting heavy. To keep myself awake, I started flipping through the radio. Stations, searching for something: music, talk shows, anything to keep me focused. But every station was static. I kept turning the dial, frustration creeping in. Then, at exactly 666 on the AM frequency, the static cleared. A voice came through. At first, I thought it was just an old radio drama. The voice was low and distorted, speaking in a slow, deliberate tone. "Ben, don't fall asleep." My blood ran cold. I yanked my hand away from the dial. I hadn't told anyone my name. My breath hitched as I stared at the glowing numbers on the dashboard. Maybe I had misheard. Maybe it was just a coincidence. Then, the voice spoke again. "Eyes on the road, Ben." I nearly swerved off the highway. My hands clenched the wheel, my heart hammering. I turned the dial wildly, desperate to change the station. But the voice didn't stop. It started whispering at first. I couldn't understand the words, just the sound of something shifting through the speakers, like breathing. Then the whispers turned into laughter. Low, guttural chuckles that sent a chill through my spine. And then, the worst part. The voice said, "If you turn around, you'll see me." I refused. My eyes stayed glued to the road, hands locked onto the wheel. The air in the car grew thick, suffocating. The back of my neck prickled, every nerve screaming that something was behind me. But I didn't look. I pressed my foot down on the gas, speeding through the night. The laughter on the radio grew louder, distorting into a shriek of static. my vision blurred with panic, and then silence. The radio cut off. The screen went black. The only sound was my own ragged breathing. I didn't stop driving until the sun rose. When I finally pulled into a gas station, my hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold my coffee. I asked the clerk if they had ever heard of radio station 666. They just stared at me. "There's no station on that frequency," they said. "Never has been." I don't know what I heard that night, but I know one thing: I will never turn around. My name is Adam, and I don't take unfamiliar roads anymore. It was a business trip, nothing special. I had driven the same highway dozens of times, knew every exit and landmark. But that night, something was different. I missed my usual turn. I could have sworn I took the right exit, but instead of the familiar stretch of road, I found myself somewhere else entirely, somewhere that shouldn't have existed. A tunnel loomed ahead. I hesitated. I had never seen a tunnel here before. It was massive, carved into the rock like an ancient passageway. No signs, no markings, just darkness yawning before me. I slowed down, debating whether to turn back. But when I glanced at my GPS, the screen was frozen. The road behind me had disappeared into blackness. There was no turning back. I took a deep breath and entered the tunnel. The moment my tires crossed the threshold, the radio cut out. Static filled the car, crackling in eerie bursts. My headlights barely penetrated the thick darkness. The walls, rough and uneven like they had been carved by something other than human hands. Then, the whispers started. Low, unintelligible murmurs, coming from the walls. My grip on the wheel tightened as I pressed forward, my knuckles turning white. The tunnel stretched on endlessly, far longer than it should have. Then, I saw them, dot figures standing in the tunnel. They lined the walls, barely visible in the dim glow of my headlights, motionless, silent. Their heads all turned toward me as I passed, their hollow eyes reflecting the light. My pulse pounded. My foot pressed harder on the gas. The tunnel had to end. It had to. A sign appeared ahead, battered and rusted, barely hanging from the ceiling. "Turn off your headlights." My stomach dropped. I didn't dare. Whatever was in here, with me, I needed to see it coming. Then, the figures moved. I slammed the gas pedal. The tunnel blurred around me, the whispers growing into a deafening roar. The walls seemed to pulse, narrowing, closing in, and then light. I burst out onto an open road, my car skidding as I swerved to a stop. My chest heaved. My hands trembled on the wheel. The tunnel was gone. I looked back, expecting to see the dark entrance, but there was nothing. Just an empty stretch of highway. The road I knew. I never found that tunnel again, but sometimes, late at night, when I drive alone, I hear whispers through the static of my radio, waiting. My name is Claire, and I should have trusted my instincts that night. It was late past midnight when I left my friend's house and started the long drive home. The highway was nearly deserted, just an endless stretch of dark asphalt cutting through the empty landscape. My only company was the distant hum of my tires against the road. Then I noticed the car. It appeared behind me out of nowhere, its headlights glaring in my rearview mirror. At first, I thought nothing of it, another driver on the road, but something felt off. No matter how fast or slow I went, the car stayed exactly the same distance behind me, not passing, not falling back, just there. I switched lanes. It followed. I turned off onto a side road. It did too. My chest tightened. My hands gripped the steering wheel, slick with sweat. Every horror story I'd ever heard about highway stalkers flooded my mind. Then my phone rang. I jumped, nearly swerving off the road. With a shaking hand I grabbed it. No caller ID. I hesitated before answering. A whisper crackled through the speaker. "Don't stop." My breath hitched. "Who is this?" No answer, just silence. Then I looked in the rearview mirror. The car was closer now, too close. Its headlights flooded my interior, blinding me. But I couldn't see a driver, just darkness behind the glass. I slammed the gas pedal, my car lurching forward. My heart pounded as I sped down the highway, desperate to put distance between me and whatever was behind me. The headlights shrank in my mirror, then suddenly they were gone. I let out a shaky breath, my pulse still racing. I glanced at the road ahead, trying to focus. Big mistake. The car wasn't behind me anymore. It was in front of me, parked sideways across the highway, blocking my path. I screamed, jerking the wheel hard. My tires screeched as I veered off the road, narrowly missing the abandoned vehicle. My car spun out, coming to a shuddering stop in a ditch. My chest heaved as I tried to catch my breath. When I looked up, the car was gone. No tire marks, no trace it had ever been there. But my phone buzzed again. One new message. No number. You didn't stop. Good. My name is Daniel, and I've been driving for hours, or maybe days. I don't know anymore. It was supposed to be a short trip, a late-night drive along the interstate, just a straight shot home. The roads were empty, the radio playing soft, static, my headlights cutting through the dark. But something was wrong. I started seeing the same sign over and over. At first I thought I was imagining it, but when I passed the exit 17 sign for the third time, I knew something was wrong. There was no way I had looped back. I hadn't turned. I hadn't even slowed down. Then I saw the gas station. A single flickering light, an old convenience store attached. It looked abandoned, but I needed answers. I pulled in, my tires crunching against the gravel. The air smelled like rain, though the sky was clear. Inside, the place was empty. No cashier, no customers. Just shelves lined with dust-covered snacks. The overhead lights buzzed faintly. Then, the bell above the door jingled. Someone else had come in. I turned to greet them, but my words caught in my throat. It was me, a man, identical to me in every way, stood by the entrance. Same jacket, same hair, same bewildered expression. He opened his mouth as if to speak, then the lights went out. Darkness swallowed everything. The air turned heavy, pressing against my chest. I stumbled backward, my hands reaching for something, anything. And then, just as suddenly as it had gone, the light returned. The gas station was empty again. Shaking, I ran back to my car, slammed the door shut, and sped back onto the highway. My hands gripped the wheels so tightly my knuckles turned white. My breath came in ragged gasps. Then I saw the sign, Exit 17. Again I screamed, slamming my fist against the dashboard. No matter how fast I drove, no matter how far I went, I always ended up back here. Then my headlights caught movement on the side of the road. It was me standing there, watching. I don't know how long I've been driving. I don't know if I'll ever get out. But I do know one thing. I'm not the only me on this road.